So here we are, sharing secrets of the soil with me, your host, Regen Ray. Hello, soil lovers, and welcome to another episode of Secrets of the Soil. I'm your host, Regen Ray, and I'm really excited to dig deep in our soils today. I'm chatting to Tony Hill. Welcome to the show, Tony.
Hi, Ray. Great to be with you. Congratulations on the show.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to explore the wonderful world of soil with you today. Can you share with our soil lover listeners who you are and your part that you play?
Okay, so I'm Tony Hill. I'm Executive Chair of the Australian Holistic Management Cooperative. It's a newly established cooperative of farmers, and it delivers the verification process for ecological health of farmland called Ecological Outcome Verification. And then we brand that with the Land to Market Australia branding so that we can communicate with consumers and businesses.
Excellent. And I think you haven't dreamed all this up overnight. Like, how long has this journey been? There's all the moving parts. I know you're creating some, great events and the verification is something I definitely want to dig deeper into. But what's the length of this journey been like for you?
Sure. And when I started to get interested in this area first was 2013. And over the years there, I started to hear about all sorts of farmers who were doing wonderful stuff. But this was a missing component. There was no component for actually verifying whether they were achieving the results that they wanted or communicating that out into the wider landscape as a kind of branding for products from their farms. So I commenced that sort of idea myself in 2016. And then I found out very soon after that the Savory Institute worldwide was working on a similar project. And so that's how we got involved with their land to market and also their ecological outcome verification. So that's where it came from.
Excellent. And so you've mentioned the EOV, which is the acronym. What does that program look like? And is it for farmers and growers, or is it for anyone who's a food producer? Who's it designed for?
Yeah, and I really need a bit of intro music or a drum roll or something here. But if you've got a kind of sound clip there that you can play. But I do want to make a really strong point of this emphasis. I don't use this word lightly, but for the human race, being able to verify the ecological health of farmland is a breakthrough. That's never been possible before, not at the level of resources that's practical for lots of farmers to implement. And that's the breakthrough of EOV, is that it's structured in such a way as it can give us robust measurement of or monitoring of the ecological health of the farmland, give us those robust numbers at the same time as being cost effective for farmers to introduce. And let's get right into it right up front. Under the co-op model, our farmers are paying $990 a year as their membership of the co-op, and then they're paying something like another $1,500 annually for their monitoring. And a lot of people, will initially say to you, gee, that's serious money. We've got to make a decision about that. And I certainly agree that everybody's got to make their decision to get into it. But compared to some of the other costs that are on the farm spending agenda, this is small money for what it delivers.
Yep. And do you think it's getting to the point where people are putting this verification on their branding, or is it more just an internal labeling verification at this stage?
The fantastic news is that it's both. Awesome. And so we certainly started at the point where we deliver very straightforward but very meaningful reports to the farmer to help them make their own farm management decisions at the same time as then building the branding recognition for their produce. And here's some news. So we haven't done a news release yet on this, but you heard it here first on your podcast. That we've just launched a page on our website, which I call, by the very colloquial term, where do you get it? And so that web page says exactly how some of our members are delivering their products out into the marketplace. And, the great news is that we're starting to get inquiries from consumers saying, I'd love to support this. I'd love to choose to spend my money in a way that's going to help the ecological health of farmland and the planet. How do I do that? Where do I go? How do I source my produce? And we've now got solutions emerging for those people.
Absolutely excited. I think the day that we can walk down an aisle and actually just know what's happening behind the scenes of that product, and verification, certification. I want to dig a little bit onto the different meanings of that in a moment, but I also want to understand, like, when someone signs up for this program, and what are the things that you're looking for in order to verify that they are looking for the outcomes of their ecological ecosystem?
So there's one fundamental technical concept here, and we confront this day in, day out without really addressing it. The ecology of the planet is hugely complex. And so that's why I used the term breakthrough before, because, even though the brain has got, more cells than there are planets in the universe or stars in the sky, the capacity of the human mind to thoroughly understand the complexity of ecology is not really matched up. We struggle with this a lot. And one of the things that we love to do is draw lines on a map so that we can understand that this ecology is a bit different to that ecology. Nature knows no lines in the map. There are no lines. It all merges at every point. So it's all a gradation. And so for the human mind to understand that complexity is a big challenge. And that's where ecological outcome verification has come into the picture. It is now proven through refereed publications that EOV is at least as robust as any of the previous more resource-intensive attempts to do this exercise. And typically, in a space of one working day, we can get out on a farm, we can take the monitoring measurements that we need, come back, write the report, and produce that for a farmer in a meaningful way. To be able to get your head around the complexity of the ecology of a farm and be able to report that back to the farmer in that limited amount of time is a huge achievement. And we only do this through accredited monitors and verifiers, so they have to know what they're doing in order to get that result and produce reliable results, both for the farmer and then for the consumers who are going to buy the product.
Yeah, I love that. It really does tell that story and understanding right from, paddock to plate, and giving people a platform to understand it and even become curious. I think, we live in a world where a lot of people don't know what they don't know. And one of the missions with this podcast is just to shed light on the world underneath our feet. And, it's always been out of sight and out of mind. It's very easy just to go a carrot. But when you start understanding what actually is a carrot, who grew it, what was their intention to grow that carrot? Was it coming from abundance or scarcity? All these things matter in the world that we live in today. And I'm really excited to continue and shed light on this verification program. I know that sometimes people have fallen a little bit worried that, the regenerative space may get all these labels and certifications and ticks and stars and all these other things that then creates consumer confusion. What's your thought on keeping that tame? And do you feel that maybe the regenerative space and the ecology sort of verification may, fall into too much red tape and confuse people if we don't keep it tight?
I just want to be a little bit naughty and not directly answer that question that you've asked me, because I want to just say something that's really important leading to that. And that is this ecological outcome for verification produces a double whammy. For the farmers, the thing that it delivers is like having an extra feed source on their paddock. And I've heard some of these things quoted recently. So it's like you went out and bought another farm to have the ecology, the ecological engine that's driving your production, to have that working better is like going out and buying more land, but at no cost other than the monitoring cost. So that's one side of the whammy. The second side of the whammy, and this is the huge one, is that consumers can get into the act of repairing and improving and regenerating the ecological health of the planet to deal with some of those huge problems, whether it's floods, droughts, mega fires, and I'll even include pandemics in that list, because they are all evidence of ecological failure in one way or another, and all the result of management decisions that collectively we've been making as a human race. So I'm not fingering any individuals here. I'm just saying collectively as a human race, there's room to improve our game. So having said that, having emphasised the double whammy of the benefits to the farmer and also this huge capacity now for consumers to get into the act and repair the planet through choosing what products they buy from farms, that's a huge achievement. Now, the question you asked me was,
are we going to mess it up by creating too many different, I don't want to compare, but I feel like a lot of consumers have lost trust in, say, Made in Australia or the organic certifications, because there's too many. No one knows what means. Some farmers can't play in the game because it's too expensive to get started, but yet their products are more organic than actually organic. So when we create this confusion, there is inaction, and people start losing trust. I think Made in Australia is a big example. They're trying to push so many people to build trust in it again, and humans are going to create shortcuts and try and create loopholes, I guess. How do you get something made in Australia? Or will you bring things in as parts? You just put the plug here in Australia and now it's made in Australia. Where does the consumer get the trust? And are you worried that we're going to have too many verification programs? Like, how do we keep that tight?
So many and trust, you're absolutely right to finger trust in this equation. And in so many ways, trust has been lost. A lot of people have lost trust, in our political leadership.
Absolutely.
They want the political leaders to act. They want, and I think what people are maybe missing here is that there's every potential for consumers individually to make their own decisions about this and do something that will really make a difference. And that's where we need to build the trust. We need people to understand and trust that when they make certain decisions, it will really have the benefits that they're seeking, and they can play a genuine role in this. And one of the positive signs here is that all sorts of businesses, from small to quite large, are starting to take an interest in this area. And I've got a few examples that I'll wheel out of businesses that have tried to move into this space because they can start to see the level of interest that will emerge from customers, and they're thinking, as businesses always do, they're thinking, if we can capture this space, if we can capture the consumer attention, if we can take part of that kind of market territory and have it to ourselves early, then we'll be ready for when the consumers come there and start to spend their money, and so we'll make more money for our business. The problem is that there hasn't been any accepted principles behind this, and so every business has started to solve the problem its own way, and so many have gone down the certification or accreditation role, which has been misleading because it's missed out on that crucial point of what is the ecological outcome.
Yeah, I love that because, I worry being in this space and seeing a lot of the moving parts and the principles of regenerative is that we don't want to pigeonhole and say, look, if you're going to disturb your soil by tilling, that's a bad thing. You lose your accreditation, because maybe that season tilling makes sense for the ecological stability of the farm and the farmer and the community. And that's why, for me, I feel like regenerative is more at the human soul level. Once we ingrain that into our being, it's very easy to practice regenerative. It might be that one day you need to do something that doesn't align with the principles, but that's because you're looking at the long-term outcome, not just that technique.
Now, Ray, I'm going to dive in there. And I don't know if your listeners are expecting a bit of colour and movement in this podcast, but they're going to get some at the moment. And so, for me, the way in which you describe that raised actually what is the problem. And so you went straight to a farming management practice. Should we till or shouldn't we till? And I know there's a lot of debate in the farming community about how tillage should be used, if at all. So, absolutely that's a controversial issue. But it's a management practice question. And so how do we tell, as you raised the question there, how do we tell the difference between the practices that have less tillage or have more tillage? How do we know the answer to that? Do we walk up to the farmer's door and go, did you till once in the last decade? Or do we go, did you till twice in the last season? You know, do we have our clipboard there and go, well, it was only once in the last decade, you're okay, mate. Twice in the last year, no, sorry, you miss out. You know, all of that management practice stuff is front of mind for farmers, but it's far too complex for an effective debate with the consumer landscape. They need something that's much more straightforward than that, because what consumer, when they're trying to do their weekly shopping, is going to have the time to kind of read a textbook on whether this farmer has done it this way or that way? You know, so they need some assurance that it's going to be working here. And so that gets to the heart of the question here. Should we go down the road of accreditations and certifications? Some of those has been popular in the past, or should we go down this verification road? And I think that's the most fascinating question.
Yep. And time will tell. And I think use cases is what will really create. And I support educating the consumer. I threw around once going, you know, maybe it's not the farmers we need to verify. Maybe we just need to have smarter buyers, smarter consumers, certified consumers. You know, let's empower the people to make better conscious decisions. Let's bring it to the grassroots. It is that bottom-up approach that excites me. And that's why I mentioned off the mic before that I'm bumping into friends that are talking about the way the plants work and that roots give and take, and that, you know, plant matter grows because it's taking minerals out of the air, not just out of the soil. You know, so when we're starting to have these conversations at dinners and out in the streets, like that excites me, because it means that people are realizing that there's more to this system.
And that's been the hard thing for the farmers and the whole community to realize, that there is a lot of power and capability in nature and in natural ecosystems. That's amazing thing, you know, but nobody's written the end of this book yet. The reason why we should have trust in this is that, you know, by some miracle or other, you know, we've got 4.6 billion years of history that tells us that it works. Now, whether it's going to continue to work with humans as part of the picture or not, that's a live question. And we need to do something to try and ensure that we survive as part of a broader ecological picture. And farmland can make such a huge difference to this. And in fact, it gets down to the grazing. So here's the controversial issue. Are animals actually helping or hindering this planetary health? And I think it's a huge distraction for everybody to think that the burping and farting of cows is actually the main game in terms of global warming. You know, cows, ruminants, have been burping and farting for a very long time based on their natural diet. You know, maybe they were a bit more or a bit less. I've seen some figures that are out there about the feedlot diets and so forth. Maybe it's been a bit more, a bit less, but it certainly hasn't, by the evidence of thousands of years of evolution, hasn't been an influence on the climate. There have been other factors in there. And so if we can get healthy ecosystems to work across the vast landscape that can only be applied to grazing, then we've got a chance of doing something about these planetary problems. That's the way it works. And so, you know, whatever decision is made by individual farmers about the management of their land and the enterprises that they run on that land will have a huge impact on where we end up in this debate about planetary health. And if you don't believe me about this, you know, here's another acronym for everybody to digest. It's OECD, Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development. It's the club of the rich countries around the world, very focused on economic activity, came out with a post-pandemic recovery plan that talked about ecosystem health. And in fact, it specifically mentions safeguarding biodiversity as one of the mechanisms to protect us against future pandemics. So, you know, it's great to have vaccines. I hope the vaccines work well. I hope the community gets out of lockdown. I hope all that stuff. But I would much rather be playing on a much more stable playing field for the future so that we can avoid some of this stuff through healthy ecosystems.
Yeah, 100%. The whole prevention over cure mentality definitely needs to be spoken a little bit more. I see this a lot in the farm management space as well. You know, we have bushfire relief funds, but there's no bushfire preventative funds. You know, there's no one incentivized to get that money to do proactive things. You know, they might have some funds for backburning and things like that. And there's all these arguments around that as well. But it's like, where's all the funding to prevent all this catastrophic stuff happening? We are such a responsive afterthought kind of group of people on the planet at the moment. So anything that gets us to think of the bigger picture, and that's what I've really enjoyed about being in this space, is that hope that I can hold on to, that the plants we're growing today will see a future. And I just want to highlight the point you made before that really hit a heartstring for me, which was we have the choice right now to write the future. What is the history later on? And I think that's a really key point, because we are at that pinnacle point now where things could go either way. And if we work together, we have the way of writing that story. You know, the ending can be as magical or as doomed as we want. So with 7.8 billion people on the planet right now, if everyone did one thing, that's 7.8 rhythms of action every single day, compounding. It gives me goosebumps thinking about it, you know? So the power of the people is there. We don't have to wait for things to be legislated. We don't have to wait for things to become scientifically proven. Like, if it feels right, do it. You know, it's so frustrating sometimes, you know, farmers going, oh, this feels like the right thing I should be doing, but show me the science or show me the data. It's like, you become the data. You create the science, you know? If we wait for everyone else to do it, we'll never do anything.
And part of my background, I actually spent 20 years working for the Australian government. So I saw a lot of stuff about how government policy is made in Australia. And that's one thing that influenced me strongly to say, no, we've just got to get a group of people out here who can do this straight away. Let's do it under the co-op model so that all the farmers are looking after the process and own it. And then we'll go and talk direct to the consumers and say, there is action that you can take right now. And all of those collective decisions will make a huge difference to where we go in the future. No doubt about it.
No doubt about it. I'm here with you all the way. So as a farmer who gets involved in this verification program, what's some of the benefits that they can see? It feels good. They're looking at the ecology. What's the, are they able to charge more for their product? Are they getting credits for some sort? Are they able to look at natural capital on their bottom lines? What is some of the benefits of being through this verification program?
It's very hard for humans to get their head around the complexity of what ecosystems are. And there's been some fantastic work done by volunteers and philanthropists to try and defend various aspects of the environment over the last few decades. The community, I think, you know, now has that awareness. They know that the environment's important, but they're still lacking in a kind of understanding. And for any human to understand the complexity of these ecosystems is very hard. Alan Savory, through his holistic management framework, has given us some tools which we can use to get our head around this. And so we're not just making singular decisions, we're making any decisions that we make in the context of everything else that we need to consider. That's the holistic view. It's a very important thing. Holistic has been picked up by a number of people and used in a very lightweight way, but this is serious use of that word holistic. So when we decide to do this or that thing, take this or that management decision, we can take it in the context of what the effects are going to be in a holistic sense. And we can think about the planet at the same time as we're thinking about our local environment. That's a very important start on it. From the ecosystems point of view, Alan has also given us a neat way of thinking about ecosystems and broken it into 4 categories: water cycle, mineral cycle, energy flow, and community dynamics. They're not separate. They're just neatly categorized so that we can easily get our head around. Obviously, if you don't provide a supply of water and food to your pet cat or dog, what's going to happen? They're going to be very sick. They're probably going to die. And if your neighbours get a view on it, they're probably going to send the RSPCA around to deal with it. But, you know, while it's very good to look after the health of furry animals and particular species and try and defend against extinctions, that's a very worthwhile thing to do. It doesn't necessarily answer the question of what about the majority of life forms on this planet. And so my communication with farmers is always, when you're looking at the four-legged livestock that's walking around in your paddock, the actual biomass of those four-legged creatures is minuscule compared to the biomass that's actually on your farm. And most of the biomass, and certainly the bulk of the biodiversity, so the multiple species, is living in the soil. Now, if I was to deny water or deny food to my livestock, same thing would happen. You know, the animal welfare people, the inspectors, the regulators would all be on my doorstep saying, Tony, why are you doing those nasty things to those animals? That's an animal welfare question. But if I do the same thing to small organisms that are living in my soil, nobody turns up to check on me. Nobody asks me that question. Did you deny them water? Did you deny them food in the form of carbon? You know, and those life forms will suffer just as the four-legged ones do as well. And that's where we have to get an understanding and a more holistic view of our perspective. Some people characterise this as saying, if the farmers look after their pastures, then the pastures will look after their farm. That's a really nice way of looking at it. And so it's all about how those pastures operate in a healthy ecosystem process.
Tony, you've just so beautifully articulated. This is exactly, I hope all the soil lovers listeners out there can understand why I've become so addicted in learning so much more about the soil, because exactly what you just articulated there is what got me so hooked into this space to go, there is so much life under our soil, and so much so that as a company, we now have our avatar as the soil. We don't care about who it is above the ground. It is a living organism. We kept thinking about, do we serve the farmer? Do we serve the grower? No, we serve the soil. That's our avatar. It is a living organism. And so that's what we wake up and serve every day. And we want more people to catch this and do something with it, learn how the soil operates, and realize that monoculture and supporting a massive soy farm is actually doing so much more damage to the life on our planet. And it's not helping the bigger picture when we start looking at things holistically. And I personally am also doing the holistic management course because I want to start looking at the many parts that make the whole and say, if I do X here, what's the ripple effect all the way down the stream? That's the holistic view, because putting an input on your farm might solve your problem, but it creates a problem for the farmer, the bird, the worm, the bug, the river, the oceans. So who's looking and monitoring that? And even far beyond, you know, weather patterns have changed, humidity has changed.
Or maybe to be quite topical, what about the reef?
Yes, that's right. Yep. It's a very topical thing at the moment. I do believe that this week they're talking about putting it on the endangered list. You know, people don't realize that the many small little things, it's like, oh, that's okay. It's just one input on my farm. But lots of farmers in one area, that runoff, because we're not holding anything on our farms anymore, is completely going into the waterways and causing havoc. You know, I was talking to someone the other day saying that they saw a platypus in their river and they hope that it's there next week because one spray of something on another farm upstream is going to kill it, you know, and like, where's the empathy of that? So, you know, I think this is one of the messages I want to really bring home, is that you might think you're doing something by, and like there needs to be an RSPCA that focuses on the soil, that rocks up to a farm and says, hey, you're killing the organisms under the ground. We're going to put a halt to your operation. The same as we do with four-legged furry friends.
I'll make a bit of a confession at this point.
Do so.
And it's an area where I feel kind of underqualified to be talking about this. And I'm just noting by looking at your face on the screen that to a large extent, you know, this is an old white guy talking to a younger white guy. And there's an amazing amount of Indigenous knowledge out there which potentially we could access if we had only the will and maybe some of the mechanisms to do so. But one of the principles that I'm starting to get very interested in is the way in which Indigenous people, and it's been on multiple continents, but particularly Australia, have had that association with the land. And I was brought up at a time when my understanding of Australia's Indigenous people was that they were kind of maybe even less than human savages with a very limited kind of capacity to deal anything with the land. This all got back to, a kind of conflict of belief systems, religion, and I was never given any chance to have respect, for instance, for belief systems that were maybe described as animism. And what I've been hearing from parts of the Indigenous discussion in Australia is that, it's not the people that come first, it's the land that comes first. And the people, I just heard this phrase again the other day, there's never a concept in that culture of land ownership.
Yep.
It's actually reversed the procedure, and the land is owning the people.
Yep.
Every part of the land has a personality, has an entity, has a belief system. Even saying those words I find so difficult because, compared to my cultural mindset that I've inherited from kind of living in my own society for so long, I find it very hard to respect that view of the world. But I do know one thing, that if we were able to treat every element of an ecosystem, of our geophysical space, of our land, as if it had the same rights as people, we would have a huge amount more respect for the land. That would be a wonderful thing.
Absolutely. And I see evidence of that moving more and more in the right direction. I agree with you, being a white male also, but I have also been quite interested in going, where is this gap in my education that I didn't learn? And I will, drop a name here, yarnaustralia.com. .au maybe, but Yarn Australia, Google that. They run monthly workshops, and that's a space that I've been hanging out in to self-educate, because I can't rely on someone else to talk to me about this stuff. I want to hear it firsthand. And so it is about being proactive. We've had guests on our virtual classrooms talking about how they're getting their local Indigenous tribe to help with their farm plan, even to the point where some of the land is free to use for the local tribe to bring back their native and Indigenous ways of living and observing and cross-pollinating their way to our way and old way with new way, and seeing where that happy balance is. So I really am hopeful and really love seeing that these initiatives are happening. And Yarn Australia is all online and virtual. You can join from anywhere in Australia and sit with elders and hear their conversations and hear their songs and hear their dances and hear the story and really learn about what happened with reconciliation. And maybe it was a little bit of smokes and mirrors and not a lot of walk has come from all that talk, and it's been really, really eye-opening for me. And I, honor the fact that you acknowledge that and say that, we are not experts. We're all doing the best we can, and we're trying to do the right thing to rewrite those end chapters.
I think there's a lot of room for the word respect in this, and respect of the knowledge, respect of the people, but more importantly, respect of the land. That's a place where I think we really need to go. Now, compared to that very grand vision, in Australia, is it white people trying to get in touch with 60,000 years, 120,000 years of cultural knowledge and experience with a landscape that we only just arrived in a couple of hundred years ago? Is it about that? Having looked at that grand vision, what we actually do in ecological outcome verification has been brought to such a manageable level that it sounds quite simple. And that's kind of a nice feature, but it's also a difficult feature. So right now, we're sitting on a position where EOV is operating in 5 out of 6 states of Australia. We're getting close to about 50 farms that are members of this, and we've developed formal linkages with now 11 market partners, and many of them are taking the produce off these farms. So a lot of those mechanisms are now in place. We need to move to a new level of operations. Why is 50 farmers not 100 farmers or 1,000 farmers or 10,000 farmers? How can we go there? How can we get enough resources and enough commitment to this to give us the base to go there? Now, we're working hard on all that. Don't kind of think that we're just kind of sitting here wondering what's going to happen next. We're trying to come up with some plans, and we're working with our members to do that. And one of the things that we're doing is recruiting a new cohort of monitors for our EOV. And so we take people in that situation who have already a reasonable foundation to build off, but still those people need to take a mental journey in order to be able to produce good results from the EOV protocol that we've got. So there's a learning process, and then there's an apprenticeship process. We've already done that on a small scale with a few people already, and the success of those people now working out in the farm landscape with the farmers has been huge. It's been really appreciated, and our monitoring events are something special when the farmer gets in touch with some of the details that we need to see to understand what this is all about. So that's starting to work well, but we really need to scale up and do this on a much wider scale and make every farm basically an ecological health engine for the nation, for the people, and for the planet.
So for anyone listening, where can they go to find out more about this? Is it the Land to Market website? Yeah,
there's a lot of stuff on the Land to Market website. The actual details of the ecological outcome verification protocol are public. There's a nice introductory document which is on the Savory Institute website, which people might not be used to this website address, but it's savory.global. And you can find links there through to Land to Market and then ecological outcome verification. So that's the kind of intellectual core of what we're doing. The activities in Australia are much better described on landtomarket.com.au, which is our website. And we managed to just escape the COVID chopper over the last 12 to 18 months. We had originally planned to hold a major conference with international participation in March 2020. A week and a half out was when lockdown started, and we just could not go ahead safely with that event. We were very fortunate that Australia had that window of opportunity earlier this year, and we managed to get our conference to happen. And the great news is that all the knowledge from that conference is now available via videos of all the presentations in the conference day on our YouTube channel. So people can access information there and see a bundle of different perspectives.
I'm glad you brought that conference up, because that's actually a conference that I managed to attend, one of my first physical events after the COVID saga. And I made a little video on YouTube explaining the excitement of actually being in a room. I'm curious, because I know that you've been in this space for a little while. What has been the change in participants and the talking of regenerative that you've seen over the years? Because I know this year it was a very jam-packed house, which was really nice to see. Have you got any pattern data to see the change?
So one of the ideas that we had behind that conference was to let people make up their own minds about regenerative. And so we understood who a lot of the key voices were in that debate, and we put them all on that program. So we've captured that information now, and we're gradually going to make it available, for free to anybody who wants to listen. But anybody who wants literacy about the regenerative journey, they can use that resource now to help them go on that journey. The challenge has been in the regenerative space is that people have come to regenerative agriculture with the same mindset that they had previously. And this gets back to that kind of constraint of the mind, of the human mind, of every human mind. Our human mind just loves categories. We don't understand stuff that we can't categorize. How do you understand the car market except by brands and models? You've got to categorize it. But that if you walk into a dealership, you can option your car up And this car won't be the same as that, even though it's the same model and the same brand and so forth. So we love these categories, and we've tried to bring categorization to the subject of regenerative agriculture, and the fit is very poor. It just doesn't work very well. And so what we need to do now is move on from this categorization process. And unfortunately, even though organic production was very popular and registered in the consumer mind, and there was even kind of quite a solid debate about the sort of price premiums that consumers were prepared to pay for organic produce, it was still based on this categorization approach. It was a checklist of practices that you could or couldn't perform. Some of them, I'm not arguing with them. Some of them might have been good. Maybe they were, maybe they weren't. Maybe they made it easy for the farmer, maybe made it hard. But regenerative is a different animal. It's completely different to that situation, and it needs a completely different approach. Lorraine Gordon, I'll credit Lorraine from Southern Cross University with being able to describe this very well. And she talks about why verification is the appropriate mechanism for regenerative agriculture. And that's because of the complexity of the ecosystems that we're trying to deal with. Those ecosystems are always moving ground. And, there's no kind of Ford factory, mass production system that works on a farm. Things change day to day, week to week, minute to minute, season to season. And farmers have to be free to keep up with those changes. They have to be monitoring those changes. Ecological outcome verification with its robust monitoring can help them do that, but effectively they've got to have the freedom to do that. So if you apply a checklist to them and say you can't move beyond this boundary, you've suddenly put a straitjacket and a constraint on them that will conflict them with the health of the ecosystems. So verification is definitely the way to go.
And I love the fact that you've spoken about mindset, because my observation in this space, and coming from the tech, business, marketing, entrepreneur kind of background, I see the mindset thing being the biggest challenge. It's not necessarily sometimes whether people want to go regenerative, but it's more about can they start viewing the world differently to start applying those principles. And that's why in the start of the conversation, I said it starts as being a regenerative human and a regenerative soul, because that's the mindset shift that we need to see the principles get accelerated, and not that checklist, the yes or no checkbox. Just yes, humans love checklists, but it doesn't work for nature, and it's not going to give us the best possible outcome for this movement. I want to get your take on the word regenerative, because there's a bit of confusion around what that actually means. And maybe it's nice that we haven't defined it on an official website, but what's your take on the word regenerative?
I start from a very simple proposition that regenerative is about making things better. The important thing about the discussion here is that the discussion about regenerative moves us on from the word sustainable. Sustainable became popular, became an idea. If we could sustain things, we wouldn't go too bad. Problem was that we were already a bit bad and we're already having some problems. So if we just sustained the problems, we just perpetuated them. We actually have to get in and improve things to make it better. And so that's where I start from on the regenerative concept, is that you have to work at making things better. But, we've now found from our experience with ecological outcome verification that you can do this on a practical basis, and you can get a metric for regenerative. You can assess whether the ecological health is improving. There's one key underlying principle of ecology that, is more observed in the breach than it is in the respect, and that is that everything's connected to everything else. Even going out and measuring something is actually part of the action. Physicists will tell you all about that. But in this situation, we go out and measure 15 indicators on an annual basis, and those indicators have been carefully chosen. Some other indicators that could have been used have been discarded because they were either duplicates, they're kind of telling us the same information, or because they were too resource intensive. But the proof of the pudding is in the eating, we can now get robust measurement out of these 15 indicators. And so we can tell a farmer site by site and for an aggregate of their whole farm whether the ecological health of their farmland is improving or not. And what that speaks to is whether the underlying ecosystem processes that drive their production are working or not. Now, one of the crucial ecosystem processes is the way in which photosynthesis works in green living plants to capture solar energy and use that energy to convert carbon dioxide into the sugars that are the mechanisms of the metabolism of the plants. You know, that's absolutely a crucial function. The more solar energy we can capture, the better that system works, the more carbon dioxide those plants will take from the atmosphere, and they will store it in the soil where it becomes food for soil life, and they will store it in the body of the plants, which then could stay there if it's a tree, or if it's a grass, it could get eaten by a herbivore and converted into something else. It's all a cycle, and it works really well if we can do it better. But while we maintain, and this is a key indicator, while we maintain on this planet areas of bare soil, they are an opportunity lost. That's an area where we are not capturing sunlight, we're not putting it to a useful purpose, we're not generating life on the planet, and we're aiding in many ways global warming.
Yeah, I love that. And doing the holistic management process myself, one of the things that I saw in one of the videos is at every opportunity that you can turn bare soil to 2-leaf, that's a positive movement. And anywhere there 2 leaves can become 3, another positive movement, and I just thought that was such a simple thing that anyone that can see bare soil, pop a plant there, throw some seeds there, let nature germinate something there. So that way there are those green solar panels capturing the energy and putting it to good use, not just.
So I did this experiment just outside my back door. And when we bought this particular house, the area just off our veranda was kind of like pretty much bare soil to kind of like a bit of a gravelly dirt area. Beyond that, to avoid getting vehicles stuck, they'd put some gravel area. And I was just desperate not to have the bare soil there anymore. So I wanted to plant a lawn. So I planted the lawn just outside our backyard, and that lawn has flourished. It's gone well. And then I took my thermometer out one sunny day and I compared some territory. And so part of the lawn had become bare dirt. And so I measured the temperature reflected off the grass, right? And then I measured the contrasting temperature off the gravel area that was next to it. And it's dark coloured gravel. So, you think it'd be pretty good for achieving heat. And I got something of the order of a 10-degree centigrade difference between the grass and the gravel. But you'll never guess what happened with the bare soil. In amongst the grass, there was a patch of bare soil. What was the temperature on that bare soil?
Share with us. Hotter. It would have to be hotter.
It was the same as the gravel.
Yes, right.
So
just one small little patch.
Just one patch of bare soil, even though it was in the middle of a lawn, was not absorbing solar energy. It was reflecting it and creating a hotter climate. Now, we talk a lot about emissions in the climate debate, but solar radiation off bare soil, is a very important factor as well.
And that's baked in the soil, killing all the organisms, drying up all the water, the moisture that's there. Like it's breaking so many cycles, so many different little mini ecosystems there, the carbon cycle, the water cycle, it's all getting disturbed just because that bare soil is there. So cover your soils, everyone. That's the message. Tony, it's been absolutely a pleasure chatting with you today. I think we could talk about this for days and days. I love soil. Hopefully you can tell. One of the questions that I really would love you to answer is, if you were the voice of our soils, what would you tell us here on planet Earth?
I would say that soil is a living organism, and it needs to be cared for in the same way as any other living organism. If we don't understand the difference between dirt and soil, and that difference being the life in the soil, then we're never going to be able to care for soil. So as the voice of soil, I would say, treat me like your pet cat, dog, goldfish, whatever your favorite pet is, and make sure you keep me healthy by supplying me with the appropriate elements for my life and my thriving life. Those elements are basically water and food. Water comes because of precipitation. And I just went through a really nice presentation of how we might deal with droughts by preparing ourselves. But one of the crucial ways to prepare ourselves for a drought, and it doesn't matter whether you're managing 1 million hectares or a backyard, making sure that the surface of that soil is amenable to the precipitation that falls, and that precipitation can enter the soil and support the life forms that are in it, both the plants and the animals, is absolutely crucial. The food actually comes from carbon, most of it. The minerals play a role too, but the carbon works its way from the atmosphere through the plants, either as litter or as root exudates, and that will feed the life in the soil. If we can look after the water and the food for the life in our soil, we will have a hugely healthier planet and a hugely healthier community.
Love that. On that note, let's wrap things up. Tony, it's been so great digging deep into soils and sharing all your knowledge and wisdom and experiences with our soil lovers and listeners today. Tony, how can people hang out with you more? Where can they find details about you?
If you like social media, get involved in our Facebook group, Land to Market Australia. That's actually a closed group, so you have to kind of be approved to join it. But once you're in it, then you can share your thoughts, and we often post our current events there. Watch out for more Farming Matters events. They'll be great. But I guess the crucial point is that if you're a farmer and you're serious about this, then become a member of our co-op, get yourself involved in ecological outcome verification. By all means, send me an email, and I'm happy to send you all the information.
Awesome. All the links will be around the video or in the show notes. So thank you very much, Tony, for hanging out with us and talking all things about soil. Thank you very much.
Terrific, Ray. Great to be sharing these ideas with you.
Excellent. Well, thanks, soil lovers. Hopefully you've learned some more secrets of the soil. Make sure that you're getting outside and digging deeper into your soils. Well, soil lovers, that's enough secrets for one episode. I really hope that you enjoyed all the secrets shared during this conversation. But hey, let's not keep it a secret. Please share this podcast around and make sure that you like it and leave us a review, because that really helps spread the secrets of the soil. Until next time, remember, get outside, get your hands dirty, and keep digging deeper into your soils.